I thought that intro would go away, but it just kind of stayed up there. I don't know who made it, but it was pretty groovy. A lot of us in the background were dancing. So that was exciting. In the chat, let us know where you're watching from. You are attending Lesson Fixer Upper today, and it should be a lot of fun. It might be a lot of challenging for your mind, but we're going to take a lesson and we're going to fix it up. And we're going to look at different models like the SAMR model and different strategies to really look at these lessons and figure out how we're going to fix them up so that they can become better lessons for your students to help them with engagement and using different levels on the SAMR model. So let's go ahead and introduce our construction workers. I think that is what we're going to call them. So I'm Stephanie Howe. I'm an instructional technology coordinator in Pickerington, Ohio. And my favorite tool when building is a hammer. I love to pound things with a hammer. So if our guests, as they're coming on, if they could please shout out your favorite tool and what you do, that'd be amazing. All right, so we also have Jenna.
Hi, I'm Jenna. I'm a math teacher in a very small town in Virginia, and mine is probably level and straight edge, just because I like things to be precise. Blame the math teacher.
All right, thank you, Jenna. And as we're waiting for Shannon to come up, oh, she is ready behind the scenes. Let us know what your favorite tool is in the chat.
Hi guys, Shannon Moore here from Central California. I'm an English speech teacher and a site tech coach. Excited to collaborate with you guys today. And if I had to identify my favorite tool, I would probably say an Allen wrench, because nowadays I feel like everything sent to my house that I get in my Amazon packages all include items that you need to use an Allen wrench. And I love building those things. So that's what I'm going to say and sticking with it.
All right. And then we have our Jeopardy winner. I love his photo. And we have Devin.
Man, that headshot and then what I came dressed up to renovate and innovate with, total cross up. Thanks for coming, everybody. You asked for a favorite tool. There's only one answer. Let's do it up. You can do anything with this. You can screw drive, you can power drill, you can punch holes, you can bring things together. One tool does it all. You can keep your hammer, because I could probably just knock whatever in with the battery pack here.
I love it. All right, so your panelists are ready to fix up some lessons. So again, our goal is to try to go beyond the substitution and encourage greater effect sizes to increase student engagement and learning. So that's kind of the goal for today's session. It's going to be interactive. You might watch us fail on camera, and that's okay. So enjoy the ride. And if this goes well, we hope to do more of these type of sessions, maybe in a Google Meet where you're also digging in with us. So just real quick, we're going to go over what the SAMR model is. So the SAMR model is a model that allows you to kind of rate your lesson on how you're using technology. And so it starts with the S, which is the lowest level of substitution. This is where technology is just kind of replacing something. So maybe instead of handwriting something, you're typing a document. Maybe instead of using an atlas, you're using Google Maps. That would be the quick substitution for the lesson. The next one is the A, and that would be where you're kind of taking it up a level. So maybe you're using the tools in Google Maps to actually measure instead of just looking at the map. And then we have M for modification, and this is where technology is starting to kind of become more transformational in the students' learning. They're using tech in higher levels than they would of just substituting a different lesson. And so this might be students are looking at Google Earth, and they might be looking at the different layers, and they're researching those different locations. And then redefinition, the R, it's creating that Google Earth, and maybe you're making a guided tour, and your students are becoming more of those creators. So that is kind of the basics of SAMR, and feel free, panelists, to hop in if I missed anything or if you wanted to say anything else about SAMR.
You know, I know a lot of people kind of give a knock to those first two levels, substitution and augmentation. You know, Look, if I was going to address full property, brothers, I'm at the substitution level. I could have gone one step further and gotten the just for man. We ran out of the supply here, right, to darken up that beard. But what you're looking to do here is really just improve what you already have in place. And that idea of enhancement is really important because every lesson we have a chance to really refine it on a year-to-year basis and take some of those same components, but elevate them so that our students are more involved and we get better information about where the learning is going. I think substitution gets a knock, but it's an important first step, especially as you're starting to navigate around a lot of the tools that may or may not be too familiar coming about right now.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Be where you are, get comfortable, and then move up as you feel needed. Every lesson is not going to be a redefinition, and that is okay. You're going to travel between the SAMR model throughout. And so in the chat, if you could let us know your level of understanding of the SAMR model, that would be awesome. I'm seeing a lot of 3s and 4s in the chat. So that is great. And then the next one, I'm going to have Devin kind of talk more about Hattie.
Thanks a lot, Stephanie. There's one, researcher who's really made his presence felt around a lot of professional development in regards to new practices or infrastructure or any other initiatives that a lot of, state level and national level or even district level groups are starting to push forward as far as initiatives. And it's the work of John Hattie. It's this idea that every sort of influence or practice in regards to education has what's referred to as an effect size, standardized as a 0.4, meaning a full year's worth of learning or academic growth. Now, it's also one of the most misconstrued ideas. The idea that if you look at a lot of the research and take all those top practices, right? And if you combine them together, a lot of people feel that if you take the top 10 best, all of a sudden you can accelerate students by 10 years. And no, that is not what Hattie's work is talking about. That's not what we're referred to as far as effect size or desired effect. It is a center of variance in regards to all these. Just as much of an impact as some of these top practices like collective teacher efficacy or teacher credibility have, where you're talking an effect size in abundance of about 1 or so. You also have some of those more detrimental ones that are out of our controls as educators. Things like corporal punishment at home or practices like retentions. Even that idea of a drop in knowledge retention during summer vacation. It's not as if it's summative. It's kind of an average or a median. So you have to take all these into consideration. Take a look at your practices, average them out, and see where you stand. If you're looking at a 0.4, then you're generally considered on pace. Don't worry about managing everything because a lot of these practices and a lot of these impacts are out of our control as educators. But if you look at some of these more meaningful practices that can elevate that average of what you as an individual or an organization are bringing forward, then you are creating the environment where more learning can take place during a standard year's worth, especially during a year like this, where a lot of that is really up in the air. So think about this. If you look at some of these top level things, they're easy to give lip service to, especially when we talk about collective teacher efficacy, which often gets thrown out there as an idea of, well, I mean, as long as you believe we'll be fine. That's not what it is. However, if you start looking at some of these practices and can shift your way up on some of these that are being put forward by Hattie and his meta-analyses, now you can start to see the greater impact that learning can have over the course of the time that you have with your learners.
Sure. And I think it's when we're thinking about it, I think a lot of the time we get overwhelmed with these kinds of things, right? We see a lot of people in the chat like, oh, well, now I don't really know where I stand or how I feel about these things. But truly, it is as simple as enhancing, we're aiming to enhance the higher order skills, and things like, group work and discussion has a very high effect size on the Hattie scale. And that's something that I think a lot of us, are doing in our classroom already, or even something like feedback. Great, very high effect size on the scale, And we all know the importance of it, and we're integrating it in most of our lessons. So I would encourage everybody out there, like, yeah, we're going to move through these things. Yeah, we're going to look at some lessons to try to enhance them, but understand where you are and what you're doing. For many people is good enough. And this is just an opportunity for us to stretch our thinking just a little bit.
All right, so now we are going to look at our projects. So we have 3 different lesson plans, and we're going to pick one lesson plan, and we're going to use you guys in the chat to help us pick. So I'm really quickly going to go over the first 2 projects, and then Shannon's going to go over the 3rd project. And again, you are going to vote for which project you would like to see us and you fix up. And if we have time, we'll do another project, but I doubt we will. So the first project is a social studies unit project. And this teacher has the students watching this video. So this video is from YouTube. I might get blocked from YouTube, so hopefully somebody lets me know. But it is just a quick intro video about culture diversity, and there's no words. It's just text, and students see different visuals pop up throughout the video. So you can just kind of see real quickly. There's different words that pop up, different images, and very visual video for students. Again, there's nothing auditory for the students to hear. The next part of the lesson, the teacher has given the students this graphic organizer that they are to use, and they are writing down what they notice, what they wonder, and any connections that they make. Okay? So again, they're taking this graphic organizer while they're reading, and they are filling out this graphic organizer. The next one is they are going to pick 2 News ELA articles from this text set, and they are able to pick any 2 that they want to read about. And then they are going to use a note and graphic organizer to take notes on. And then after they finish their notes, they're going to write a paragraph on Google Docs answering the following question. Is the United States a culturally diverse country? Support your answers with details and examples from the text. Okay, so that is the lesson plan from 1. I did just go into different Google Classrooms and kind of scale these lessons. So they are real life lessons, okay? This was the information that was given to us. So that is how we're going to go. Again, I'm going to share the Google Slides in the chat if you need to look at this a little bit more in depth, or if you need to click any of the links, you're more than welcome to do so. Okay. The next project, so project number 2, if project number 1 didn't meet your eyes yet, is we have a teacher created video. It's an overview, and the teacher did create it, so I didn't want to put her identity out here, so I did not link it. It's 1-minute video of an overview of what the students are to do for the week. And then they have a Google slide, and on the Google slide, it's a math notebook. And so on the math notebook, the students have to really quickly write what they notice about these fractions over here. And then they have to write what they wonder about the fractions. So that's warm-up number 1. Warm-up number 2, they have to use this number line, and they have to figure out the answers to these different math problems. So there's 3 math problems. Okay. Then after they do that, there's an Ed Puzzle video. And throughout the Ed Puzzle video,
is a number line.
You can hear that there is text throughout, and there are questions embedded throughout. And there are also notes. So right here it says absolute value is a distance. A number is from 0.
Absolute value.
And then this one is another note. Let me see if I can find. This one should be the question. Here's the question. So there are a couple questions built in. Again, if you need to look over these, feel free to get on the slide deck and you can view in more detail. Then there is an absolute value note sheet. So this is a Google slide. The teacher has the I can statements for the lesson. And then over here, it talks about what absolute value is. key concept number 2, ordering absolute value, and then the meaning of 0. So just real quick slide deck of notes for the students. And then the students will complete a Wiser assignment. So Wiser is a digital worksheet. And on here, they are matching the different vocab words for absolute value. And then they're doing some multiple choice and then matching questions. And then some more multiple choice down here. And then at the end of the unit, so this would probably be a week-long lesson, the students are going to take an Edulastic quiz. And there are 5 questions based on absolute value on their quiz. Okay. And then Shannon is going to go over project number 3.
All right, so this would be an ELA 9th or 10th grade lesson. The California standards there are on the side. We're going to be talking a little bit about theme, identifying theme across 2 different poems by analyzing, the characterization, plot, symbolism, conflict, etc. So first and foremost, the students would be given both poems, The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe and Home by Rupert Brooke. So those would be side by side on a Google Doc. In that, the students would be analyzing those poems by using the comment tool in Google Doc, the highlighting tool in Google Doc, just the resources that exist within that. After the fact, after they mark it up and annotate it, what they'll be doing is they'll identify a common theme between the 2 by analyzing those aspects that I mentioned a second ago. So there's a digital graphic organizer that they will go ahead and fill out, and simply put, it would be pull multiple pieces of textual evidence for each of the elements identified, plot, character, conflict, symbols, and then from there do a quick compare, and come up with a theme statement. So a common theme between The Raven and Home is, and then they would fill out that graphic organizer.
All right, so in the chat, if you could let us know which project you want us to work on. Is it project 1, which is the social studies lesson, project 2, which is the math lesson, or project 3, which is the ELA lesson? So we will give the chat a little bit of time to pick. And our construction workers can get their tools ready.
I'm really curious to see what everybody starts to throw out there, because there's a really good variety of the 3, and not just, content area wise, but as far as the approaches to what the learning really is.
I am too, because every single teacher is different. And so when we went into these classrooms, I was like, oh, that's an interesting way, to teach this. And then Shannon's way of teaching it is completely different, just the different districts too, and the resources that we have in these districts too. All right, what are you guys seeing in the chat?
I'm seeing a lot of 2s. Project Math, we have a couple 1s, a couple 3s, but really it seems like 2 is the winner.
And I'm going to put the slide deck again in the chat. If you need a repeat of it, you can click through the links and look through it. Also, if you want to repeat, feel free to rewatch and catch up with us as we're going. All right, so let's go ahead. And you guys ready for project number 2?
Let's go.
Okay. So let's review project number 2 real quick. We have that teacher-created overview video. We have the virtual math warm-up. That's the Google Slides. The absolute value ed puzzle with notes and a couple questions. The absolute value notes, which was that Google slide. The Wisers, and then the Edulastic quiz. All right. Anything you guys need to see again on the big screen, or you guys good?
I think I'm good.
Okay. All right. So what we are going to do next is we are going to be working on a Jamboard from the back end. So I'm going to go ahead and post that link in the chat. You will have view only, but our panelists will be able to edit. So on the Google Jamboard, we're going to go ahead and go to project number 2. And let's go ahead, and how would you guys rate this lesson? So how would you rate this on the scale of SAMR? Would you think it's substitution, augmentation? What are you guys thinking?
I see a lot of substitution here. And I think the reason why is because, you look at a lot of the notes, and these are notes that the teacher would have had on the board converted and given to students in slide format. The notice and wonder, it's a slide that would have been up, and they would have had a conversation in person. How are students interacting with that? Instead of in their notebook, they're doing it on a slide. The ed puzzle is an in-person conversation back and forth, and now we're taking a lot of those pause points and replacing them with formative data to get a sense of checking for understanding. So in that regards, I see mainly a lot of substitution. I don't see that lesson in particular as one that would be too different from the core components if it was to take place in a live instructional setting.
Yeah, I think that I agree on that. I think that the very epitome of this is, if we're moving from substitution to augmentation, that there is a functional improvement. And I really don't think, I think they've just taken the concepts and they've thrown them, delivered them in a technological way. So, used it to enhance virtually. So I would say also that, I would say substitution.
Okay.
And then what Hattie strategies have you seen, or do you see in this lesson? Do you see any of his strategies that he might suggest that teachers use?
I think what's more telling is what isn't there from a lot of those top tiers. You don't see a lot of classroom discussions. I think, there's an attempt with what do you notice, what do you wonder? But, a lot of times when those get used as warm-ups, they're not the linchpin of a conversation. It's more of like, okay, just show me that you're with me today. It's like a check-in. It's like a live pulse check read, So I think that I don't necessarily see anything too metacognitive that really brings it beyond that 0.4. But with that said, I don't think that this is necessarily developmentally detrimental to what students are doing. I don't think you're going to have any reverse or negative scales. It just needs a couple of nudges to move it up to that desired effect size.
Right. What I do think exists here, though, is real-time feedback with some of the Edulastic quiz and aspects like that. I'm not saying that it necessarily is the most meaningful feedback, but it does give probably that real-time feedback, which is, higher on Hattie's scale. But yeah, there's not a lot of collaboration, nor is there a lot of, really like kind of deep critical thinking. It's a lot of receiving and not a lot of like, okay, let me take, process, and then figure it out for myself, or put some applying it. There's not a lot of application.
It's very low level blooms. It's staying down at that bottom level where you're pushing the information to them. They have to get it or they don't. And okay, we're moving on either way.
Yeah, and I love what our chat is saying too. I mean, people are saying, this is teacher-led lesson. There's no open discussions. And then even people are getting ahead of us and throwing out tools already of what they could do to make it, kind of looking better. So our next step is there was a Google form that was shared with you. Go ahead and open that up in another tab, or people watching online, not the construction side of things. And on this Google form, go ahead and pick project 2. And if you want to fix up another lesson, you are more than welcome to, because you will be able to see all the different ideas. So we want you to collaborate with us. And I want you to go ahead and write down what level you thought the lesson was at, what strategies you've seen, and then we're going to start with how we're going to improve lesson 2. Okay, so now the next step is we're going to start working on this. And we would love for you to add your ideas. by using this Google form. So please use this Google form to help us collaborate together. And again, we'll be sharing all of these resources with you so you can think, if you're teaching ELA, how could I use some of these tools that they suggest in my own lesson for my content that I'm teaching? Maybe you're not teaching absolute values, and that's okay, but how can you use some of these conversations and ideas that we're having? Okay. So where should we begin?
I would say, maybe instead of, the teacher giving kind of all of the notes and providing them all of the resources to, to substitute the direct instruction, maybe you release students to do some of that research on their own. And then as a collaborative, pair or small group, they can create their own Google form, like their own quiz using Google Form and Google Draw. That way they are taking the material, digesting it, and then applying it. And then they can ultimately give that to their peers, cross group, quizzes, and get some feedback in that way.
One of the things I like about absolute value is the variety of ways that students can articulate the way that they make sense of this. And it's really important that students have a direction for what exactly it is they're going to do. One subtle change I'd make in those notes, you mentioned that the I can statements are there. If you think about that, that's midway through the lesson before students really have a vision for what exactly they're going to be doing during the lesson. So one subtle change, and it's not always about like bringing in a new tool that does the thing that you want to do more effectively, is just preparing students for that and activating that. So let's take those learning intentions and success criteria, bring it to the very beginning right before the overview video. So now you go in with the expectation and understanding of what it is exactly that you're going to be doing. You take that, and then towards the end, after the Edulastic quiz, or maybe before then, actually before you take the quiz, I think it'd be very helpful, is you bring in a reflection piece. Allow students to articulate and verbalize how they understand the concept of absolute value in their own words. And you could do that through Flipgrid. You could do that through a form. You could do it through however you want to do it. But we talk about moves that kick up, Hattie's effect sizes. That's where you're talking about summarization. Summarization has an effect size from 2018 as a 0.79. That's double a standard year. If you make that part of your practices, you're going to see results. And so whatever tool you prefer to bring that in as far as a summarization, outside of just a standard exit ticket where you're just checking out A, B, C, D, okay, I got it. Put it in your own words. Narrate over a lesson. If you take that video of the concept that's an EduPuzzle and now put your own voice to it as a student, man, I'm going to get such good information about what you know about this now.
Yeah, I love that idea of narrating over a video. And I think, too, we have to think about all students. So what are we going to do for that student that is performing above grade level, that might be bored with this lesson? What are we going to do with that student that is performing below level and is really struggling? Any suggestions on those two types of students?
I mean, I would just say, I'm a big fan of if our students are at a higher order thinking, and mind you, I'm coming from an ELA perspective, and so math genuinely makes my mind hurt, but teaching is teaching. And if we're talking about the higher order thinking, really, truly, we need to give students, our advanced students, like a space to create, right? And so I really like to mention how you mentioned that idea of, using a screen share. Why can't students, instead of students, just watching the video or watching the EdPuzzle, why can't they create their own screen share, their own video tutorial using Flipgrid? Flipgrid is a great resource for that, right? We have the opportunity for screen share. You have the whiteboard built in, and then students can then even comment on that, video comment or just text comment after the fact on those tutorials. And so that gives them an opportunity. Jenna, what about supporting students who maybe are struggling, a little bit below level? What do you think?
So we do a lot with Desmos in our classroom because so many people don't realize it's not just a calculator. It actually has huge amounts of activities that are pre-built for you that are self-checking. So the kids get that immediate feedback and they know if they're doing something right or if they're making a mistake. And you can create your own. So we do a lot with like the card sorts. And if the kids put them together right, hey, those work, it turns green, they know to leave those alone. There's actually two I put on the Jamboard that are both for absolute value that kind of word it a little differently and help explore it as a more real life thing where it's talking about distance, talking about how it doesn't matter what's the relationship between these numbers versus just, oh, this is negative, this is positive, add them together. It helps them practice it and gives them that extra time without making them feel less than.
I think too, to support checking for understanding and getting ultimately into, ideally, you know, what we're really talking about here is a response to intervention program, an effect size of 1.29, right? Is having opportunities to check in with students and then release. Where's the gradual release of responsibility? Like you said, this is a teacher-led lesson. So as a student, there really isn't an opportunity for me to move on and figure things out and practice it when I feel like I'm ready for the practice. So having some of those checks in, having some of those questions, you know, maybe even bringing the wiser midway through. If I've passed that quiz midway through, I don't need to stick around with you. Let me off on my own. And as a teacher, that's going to let me focus my energies and create a breakout room with students that do genuinely need my greater attention to detail. To get to your point, Shannon, as far as, you know, having those discussions with, you know, from the EL lens and making sure students are able to utilize things and use vocabulary as a tool for clarity instead of another thing I got to memorize.
Yeah.
You know, Notice and Wonder is a great tool, but, you know, it's starting to kind of get into that, you know, that space where it's seen as kind of a joke because it's not being utilized properly. It's become cliche. I love the idea of same or different when it comes to absolute value, comparing what you know and bringing in to connect with what you didn't. There's scaffolding involved in that. There is using prior knowledge. The idea of taking something like, you know, a which one doesn't belong or a same or different. Let's just have two values. Let's have -6 and then the absolute value of -6. And just those two. And just ask kids, what is the same about these two? Or rather, what's different about these two? Whichever one you want to start with. And just allow them to respond to that. Now, I know a lot of people think in the chats, you know, when students are there, like, every class has that kid like, oh, they're just waiting for the one kid to put something in the chat. Okay, so here's how you reverse that. It's a strategy called the chat blast. So here's what you do. You ask kids a question that you want more people to respond to rather than just the one kid. Have them type it into the chat box, but don't hit enter. Don't hit enter. Type it in, don't hit enter. Give you 30 seconds to just type something in. Then on the count of 3, I want everybody to hit enter at the same time. 3, 2, 1. Boom. Look at all the responses that come in all at once. It is breathtaking. And it lets you know that everybody's there, but also it gives you more immediate opportunity to see what kids genuinely think about the question that's asked. You've given them time to prepare, and they get to see how each other thinks. And you pick something up. Now, think about all the directions you could take that conversation. There's ways to do this where one kid isn't dominating that chat box or coming off mic. It just requires us to think differently about the medium that we have. But those strategies are there.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. We call the chat blast the waterfall chat in my world. And it is seriously one of the most invaluable things we've used in virtual teaching, right? To get multiple voices and get everybody an opportunity to share without that one kid constantly. Yeah.
It's the same. I think we're just using different words to talk about the same thing. It's a great idea, regardless of what you call it.
Right.
Yeah, so I think those are all really good suggestions just to quickly upgrade a lesson. And I think we should talk more about collaboration. So how can we get the students talking and working together more, either through remote or socially distanced? So if we are in a classroom, we've got half the class, and teachers are really worried about that socially distanced part of it being, 6 feet apart. So how would you suggest right now collaboration? I've seen a lot of teachers take it out of their lessons where they were doing good before COVID with that collaboration. And then the virtual world or that rule of 6 feet kind of kind of got them, and it was like, oh, we're not going to do that anymore. So how could we allow this collaboration?
I would use a Jamboard, and I would refocus this concept of absolute value into a co-crafting situation. So co-crafting is a math language routine that allows you to deconstruct and make sense on your own terms of a problem before you're asked to actually solve it. So I might take like a word problem in regards to absolute value, right? Something to do with maybe elevation or progress, like yardage in football or something. Then have students pair up into groups of 2, send them into breakout rooms, right? Then have each of them reframe the question. Take the problem and have them change it up a little bit, however they want to change it up, whether they want to change the values or the concept or the context, however. Then solve the problem that they created in their breakout room with their partner. Exchange the problems. So have them solve each other's problems. Then have them put those problems in a Jamboard slide. And then they visit other groups' Jamboard slides and work on those problems. Now, everybody's kind of working with the similar construct and the concept. But after a few rounds of that, bring everybody back together and now bring that original problem back in. They've had a chance to give each other understanding and feedback and break down problem-solving strategies and looking at the same context in a lot of different lenses, and honors their experience and voices. And now they've been able to deconstruct a problem and then put it back together to make sense of the original. And they haven't been asked to solve the original at all during this entire time. But when they are, they're more ready for it.
Yeah, and we have a template. I'm going to share it real quick. That kind of goes over what you were kind of saying. It's stick it together, problem solving activity. And so what we like to do is have student 1, they work on their post-it note, student 2, student 3, student 4, and then they come together to talk about their best answer. So that has been really helpful, especially in this remote setting, and I'll share the template in the Jamboard, so feel free to look it over or steal. But it's really gotten kids that need that think time to process what problem they're solving, and then they're able to come together as a group and explain it, and then as a whole group, they work together to solve this problem.
I like it.
I think that does so many things. It does so many things. It now applies a purpose. It makes the conversation genuine and authentic. It centers around a product. It gives them time to prepare. So the conversation has a point. It's not simply like think, pair, share. Why are we doing think, pair, share? They said you had to talk to each other. But it gives that language of math a purpose and an application. And that's one of the most genuine means of acquiring language, is when you have a point to why we're actually using these terms. And that's something I think that is really missing. And that's one of the other things I noticed about this lesson. There's a lot of emphasis on vocabulary at the end without an opportunity to really build that familiarity with applying it. And so I think there is a missed opportunity to engage actual metacognitive conversation about the vocabulary before you impose it onto a matching, which I think sets up kids for failure sometimes.
Absolutely. It's good.
That was good. All right. Do we want to go to another lesson since we have some time?
Sure.
All right. Do we let them vote again or just pick one that we want?
No, they took the time to come out here, and let's honor that and make sure we give that voice.
All right. So in the chat, let us know if you want project 1 or 3 now. So project 1 was the social studies lesson, and project 3 was the ELA lesson. And I know we're a little bit behind, so we will. See 2 1s.
3 1s. All right.
Oh.
It's like one maybe wins.
We should have done a waterfall on this.
We probably should have. Peer pressure. Everyone's like, pick one because Mel's been like all over the chat and scaring people, I think.
No, Mel's awesome in that regard. Keeps it lively.
She is. All right, so let's review this lesson real quick. So we have the students are watching a video, and again, it has just visuals and text. And then they're using that graphic organizer to write what they notice, what they wonder, and the connections that they've made. Once they do that, they are going to read the 2 articles of their choice on this Newsella, and they're going to take notes on a graphic organizer. And then they are going to write a paragraph on a Google Doc answering the question. So again, on the chat, you're going to open up your Google form, and you're going to pick project 1. And feel free to do this with us. So where do you think it's rating on the SAMR model? What instructional strategies do you currently see? And we're going to go ahead and go to project 1 on our Jamboard. And how would you guys rate this lesson?
I think it's almost an augmentation. And I say almost because there are a couple of elements that that are missing from functional improvement. One is the video, I think, lacks a voice. It may have words. It may have jangly, cutesy, corporate happy ad kind of music behind it. But, you're missing out on an opportunity to access another means of media instruction by having an actual voice behind it. So other than that, it's basically like moving words with music. So I don't even want to even call it a video at that point. I feel like you could do so much more with the KWL. I feel like that's kind of thrown in there. And that notice, wonder, and connections, that's really what it is. It's a KWL chart, isn't it? Right? Let's kind of call it as we see it. I love the idea, though, of getting into the News ELA articles. I almost think that if you bring that in sooner, you have an opportunity to move it into augmentation because you have an opportunity to filter that into the question sooner. And the whole point of this is to answer in a Google Doc that question, is the United States a culturally diverse country? I feel like if students know that that's going to be the question in advance, it gives them a purpose to read those articles in advance. And with that, then you can start to bring in some of those more collaborative tools. So I feel like you're almost there, like just a couple of nudges and you're at augmentation as it is.
Yeah, I completely agree. I would mimic everything that Devin said. Well,
if you're going to mimic it, you got to talk with the accent, though. Come on, let's go.
Oh, gosh. I'm not even going to.
Got to give the people what they want.
They don't want it. They promised you they don't want it. I do think that.
All right, everybody, let's go. 3, 2, 1.
I do think that there is value. Although the video doesn't necessarily have voice and it is, a lot of reading, I do think there is value in the video because it is short and gives a pretty straightforward, here is what we mean by cultural diversity. And so that really does help support our individual students who maybe have no idea what that idea means. And so to send them to Newsella and say, go find articles about cultural diversity, they're going to go type that into the search bar and it's going to be like, okay, I guess this works. And then there's not going to be a lot of direction. Yeah. But if we, like you mentioned the last one, clear success criteria, maybe at the top and clear learning goals, I think really ultimately we know that enhances any lesson, right? If you give students an opportunity to kind of self-check themselves across the whole unit or lesson, it really does kind of point to a clear, I understand this, but I don't understand that. Allows for a little bit more metacognition about their own learning. So, but I want
to address a question that came through in the chat from David Farley. How much does timing affect Samurai? And that really is a matter of opinion, right? Like that's a sense of, teacher preference. I love, as an educator personally, the idea of keeping things moving. Like if you're only going to do 2 or 3 things during an instructional session, I feel like you miss a lot of opportunities to make further connections. Not to say you have to cram everything in, But you can always find ways to steal those seconds back if you're crucial about the value of them. So like we have a 2-minute, 30-second video here that's basically blocks of text that move along at a pretty steady pace. So you can do a couple of things with that. It's a YouTube video, so you could speed up the video a little bit. You can kick it up to a 1.5 play speed. You could put together your own narrated video with subtitles. You're on screen. I mean, you could just say those things, right? There's a way to bring that down from 2:30 to a minute. Now you've got a minute 30 left for something else that enriches what we just experienced through that video or through that narration. So I feel like if you can find things that do the things that you want to do more efficiently, then it's no longer simply substitution. You're moving it up into augmentation and then potentially into those other two where you're actually transforming what you used to do because you have basically removed a lot of the barriers that just sucked time away from everybody's experiences.
And I like that. I mean, the video does go into vocab words that the students are going to see. But I do think if they are new vocabulary words, a lot of kids struggle with vocab, so they need to hear them. Because if they're reading the Newsella article, they might struggle with some of these words because they only saw them in the video. So I think that would have been a really good time to add that voice. And I know we talked in the other lesson, like using voiceover. Maybe the kids could take this video at the end and create their own voiceover about what they learned with their project or whatever.
Or how about you as an educator, right? Who needs the jangly music? It's not necessary. It's public domain. Sure, great. Didn't have to pay for it. But mute that. If there's no narration, you as an educator can mute that, and now you're the narrator. You get to put your voice on it, your spin, your say. You know that this video was not made for your students. So by allowing you to put your voice on this, by muting it and turning your mic on and taking over, now you get to see how this piece leverages into the rest of the lesson on your terms.
And I would change the intro completely, to be honest with you. What I would do, I'm all about exploration in groups. And, you know, I think so often we resort to just kind of giving the information to our students because we think we can control that and maintain that and it makes it easy. But if we're really truly aiming for these higher order thinking skills, I think the way that I would approach the beginning of this lesson is instead of just giving them the cultural diversity video and leaving it there, what I would do is I would encourage synthesis amongst groups. So create a collaborative group and give them the cultural diversity video. So here's one source for you to use. I want you guys to go find 2 others, right? Synthesize that information. And then I want you to go to Canva or Google Draw or Adobe Spark, whatever, you know, your platform is. And I want you guys to create an infographic, or I want you guys to go create an image that gives us as a class the kind of insight into what cultural diversity means, because there are a lot of voices out there. And so not only are you allowing them to figure out the definition on their own by researching and finding and creating, which is that highest level of order or highest level of thinking, but also you then can take those graphics and you can put them on a Google site, a classroom Google site, so that individuals throughout this process can go back and reference and have sources and have all of those resources, you know, that they could pull from when they are creating their piece of writing. So it takes a bunch of different voices, it takes a bunch of different sources, it synthesizes it in one space, and then the students can reference that as they go across the unit.
And I'll take it a step further. Let's look at the other side of it. I'm a big fan of looking at negative space. You know, you look at the FedEx logo, I'm the one that sees the arrow between the E and the X, right? And then you can't unsee it. This is a yes or no question as a lesson, right? Ultimately, the whole thing is America culturally diverse? Yes or no? Prove it with examples. Okay, I could just pick one and then find evidence but here's the thing. If it's not culturally diverse, then what is it? So are there ways for you to bring in examples of culturally homogenous cultures? See what they look like. Now you can do a direct comparison. You can bring in statistics. You can bring in data on, you know, colonization from other countries, especially in Latin and Central America, right? Compare that to other parts of the world where, you know, you have populations that have the same religion and the same ethnicity for 95% of its population, right? Like at what points in those proportions can you define a culture as diverse. So if it's not culturally diverse, then what is it? Have that conversation. That's going to allow for deeper analysis and reflection and connecting the true experiences, because you're going to have kids in that class based on their experiences with America that are going to say, no, it absolutely isn't. And if it is, it's not respectful of it.
Yeah. And in addition to that, a lot of people are throwing in the chat like this idea of philosophical chairs or Socratic seminar, right?
Yeah.
I love philosophical chairs. I think Nancy, somebody from my area, shouted that out. The idea of, putting, and you can do it virtually using Jamboard, right? Two sides. Students can move their sticky notes, or if you're in the classroom, even maintaining social distance, you could still kind of carry this out and engaging in that debate. And I know Pili mentioned that like you have to be mindful of time constraints, and that's true. That absolutely is true. But I think also at the same time, these higher order thinking skills, if we're putting in activities that are more than just let's go do this on our own, okay, now go write, and we're actually building in opportunity for that collaboration and that feedback and that true assessment, real-time assessment we can receive with something like philosophical chairs, Socratic seminars, the ideas that, Devin was mentioning, like then the writing is going to be that much more robust, have that much more depth. And you won't necessarily, in my opinion, based on my past experience, you won't necessarily have to do as much reteaching because you can kind of shift that along the way and check those, have those checkpoints along the way. So it's not like go do this thing, go right. Okay, now you guys have totally missed the mark. Let me go ahead and reteach, right? And so, yes, time constraints. I totally get that. We have those. I see my students, twice a week for an hour at a time, and I really have to maximize that. But at the same time, if I can check along the way, it really does help at the end.
Yeah, those are some really, really good ideas. And I think, too, looking at the lesson, I love the idea. I forget who said it in the chat, but allowing the kids to pick the two articles. And I think there were maybe 6 or 7 articles on the Newsella, or 5. But then having them share as a group. Okay, I picked these two. Which two did you pick? I know John, he does Edu Protocols, and they have one that's Cyber Sandwich. And so Cyber Sandwich is taking the 2 different articles and comparing and contrasting them together with a partner. So then taking your 2 with the other partner's 2, and then working together to figure out what are the similarities and what are the differences, and then coming up with a paragraph or whatever together can really boost this lesson as well. And then this paragraph, someone in the chat, it said, does the final product have to be a paragraph?
Oh.
And it doesn't. If you read the standard, it says nothing about students will have to write a paragraph by the end of this lesson.
Yeah.
So just make sure you know your standards and decide what tool is going to be best. Yeah, and I love the social media. That is so popular right now in today's culture. Like, how could we use social media to bring out this lesson to show the different culturally diverse of the Western Hemisphere? Maybe the students are creating a Flipgrid. I really love what this says. Like, it doesn't have to be a final product. And I think sometimes we get wrapped up in that. Like, we've always done it this way. And I think sometimes we have to leave that behind and allow kids to get more creative and use some of these creative apps to help them show their knowledge.
I've seen the idea of social media, and obviously there's a lot about like kids having their own social media that we want to be very delicate with. But as educators, you're here, right? Like, you're using it. And so what a great opportunity for you to leverage yours for your students. There is a lot of power in the constraints of like a Twitter post. You only get 280 characters. You have to be very selective about the words you choose. I think it takes a lot more skill to write a really well-constructed tweet than it does to write a standard paragraph. And so if you want to leverage that, if you are a self-contained teacher that wants to bring in ELA and, history and enrich that, that's how you do it. Make a tweet that's good enough for me to post on mine, and I will put that on there for more people to see. I want to signal boost your voice. And that's really what it's all about, right? We want to make sure that students understand that their learning is noticed. And then when you understand things more clearly and put your voice on it in a cogent and clear way that is powerful, people pay attention. And that's the whole point, is we want students to know that their learning matters. So let's put it out there for a purpose and a product.
Yeah, and I think also you could do it another like approach would be, have the students before they like dive in and whatever their final product or whatever they're going to, create to share their understanding of the concept, have them go like conduct interviews with people. I think there's something so powerful, the idea of design thinking. Steph Rothstein kind of told me about it, right? Got me into it, and I've dove in. The idea of design thinking is great, and it all starts with empathy, right? If you can build empathy, it does open the door for lots of different kind of approaches to this topic, right? A lot of the time, kids are going to come in with a perspective of, oh, cultural diversity means this, right? And have that understanding based on environment or whatever. But if you can get them to get outside themselves a little bit, and maybe, I don't know, maybe you do a flip grid where you have the grid pals, right? And they create this, and then they can share it with someone across the world and have a conversation via Flipgrid. It's created, it's a space for them, it's a safe space. And so I just think there's opportunity beyond just our typical approach. And I know that it's easy to stand here and say, these are all the things we should be doing, right? But I'm finding so much more that now, especially with COVID education, we have an opportunity to take a few more risks, right? And really stretch ourselves as innovative educators. And the reality is we're going to fail. There's going to be opportunities where we succeed, and then there's going to be moments where we fail. But failing forward and trying, you run the risk of success, and you run the risk of deeper thinking. And I am a proponent of creativity, and anytime we can bring that element of creativity into the classroom, I think that our lives and our students' lives will be enhanced. And I think technology is just a support in that.
That'd be an amazing opportunity to do like a connection. Okay, one of those News LA articles about Ecuador. Great, let's connect with a classroom with Ecuador. Okay, my student said that your country is culturally diverse. Do you agree? No. Whoa, really? I want to hear why you don't think so. So, wow, like what an opportunity it is to get somebody else's lens on what you studied about them and then reflect that on your own world.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can do that. Why not?
And it's so easy in today's world with technology, especially Flipgrid. I mean, you don't even have to do a live discussion, you can just send the video link and record.
Yeah.
So let's talk real quick. I know we only have a couple minutes, but how could we adapt this lesson, do you think, Jenna, for like students with disabilities?
I do like, because Newsella has the differentiated tier. It actually has, what is it? I think it's like 4 or 5 different tiers per article. So for my lower babies that are struggling to read, it's built in for them. But I think I like the idea of not making them write a paragraph, because for some of them that's a struggle. Like we think 5 sentences, and okay, that's nothing. But for some of them, that's 3 hours worth of work. I like letting it be graphic and making that infographic that Shannon was talking about, and giving them that different outlet, because most of them are much better expressing visually than they are in writing. Or even just partnering them up with a friend and having that conversation and letting them not think pair share, but have an honest discussion where they can, I feel this way because, and they can back up why they say that. And they may get that from the article. I don't much care for that video, just because like, a lot of happy words going by, but are my ADHD kids going to be able to keep up with that, or are they going to lose every bit of their focus to all the pretty, and the bouncy? So yeah, it might be. I'd rather see it be a minute of less happy colors and a minute of them understanding a video that I make, than 2.5 minutes of I've lost them, and I've now lost them for the whole block.
Yeah. I think also with those conversations, providing language frames for them to have, because I think a lot of the time one issue that I think my site struggles with is this idea of, we put you into breakout rooms because we're all virtual, and the students, you will pop in as an educator and the students are just kind of staring at each other. And a lot of the time the feedback I get is I don't really know what to say or how to start. But providing those language frames for that discussion and that conversation that they can reference, I don't know, on say like a I have mine on my like site, my support site, my resource site, you know, Mrs. Moore's resource site that they can go to. And it's not like a, hey, I need you to use these language frames. It's a constant reminder of, hey, there's this resource. If you're struggling to dialogue, go ahead and bookmark it, or let me show you how to do that. Or here it is in the chat before you head out to support that.
One of the simplest moves we can make with a video is if you have a video built into a slide, don't go full screen. You don't need the full screen. Everybody's going to see it just fine. Take half the screen for your video and put it in a frame to the side. Now you have the whole rest for that question or that sentence frame so that you know exactly what you're about to talk about. You know exactly how you're going to start that conversation, and you know precisely why you're watching that in the first place.
And I so agree with Philly, how she said also reading them takes a lot of work in grading. And we know from like tons of research that immediate feedback is so much more effective than waiting a week for you to grade these essays. So anytime you can meet and conference with students to check their understanding and give them that feedback right on hand is going to be more beneficial than just waiting and grading an essay. So thank you so much for joining us today, especially our panelists. We hope you enjoyed this session. And, oh, who's in the background there?
You guys getting ready to take over on the computer before me, buddy. We're going to have to go ahead and fix some light bulbs, too. I got your pencil. You ready to go? All right.
And so on the Google form, once you go to the last section on the form, you're going to see your beautiful houses. But if you could just leave us some feedback, that would be awesome. We just want to know, was this session helpful? And then why or why not? Do you have any lesson plans that you would like to see us kind of work on and upgrade? And then if so, let us know the links. Feel free to also reach out to me and we can maybe do a session. So we would love, love, love your feedback. And we hope you really enjoyed this session. And if you need to reach out to any of us, the slide deck is right here and all of our information is on the first 5 slides. And then Shannon was super nice and she created a Wakelet. This Wakelet is a resource for you when it goes over the SAMR model in more depth. We know we had a lot of 3s and 4s. And so if you need more resources, there are so many different links on this Wakelet that can help you learn more on how to upgrade your lesson in meaningful ways for your students. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Until next time.